Everybody's got the same basic wiring, regardless of the age, gender, or ethnicity. Terrorist leaders, these are still human beings. Hostage negotiators know how to get in and cause an actual productive dialogue, or at least you're going to think it's a productive dialogue.
You said the most dangerous negotiation is the one you don't know you're in.
I know what chemical changes are going on, and the minute you articulate what's in the other guy's head, that's how we get in the side door. Nobody in my company tries to get anybody to say yes. I'm going to get you to say no because I know you're going to react differently. You instantly begin to think about how to make something work. Everybody you talk to could help you if they felt like it. We prosecuted Muslim terrorists in civilian court. Nobody got killed, nothing blew up, and the vast majority of our witnesses were Muslims who were testifying voluntarily against other Muslims. So how do we do that? By seeing things from their point of view. Don't be in such a hurry to lay out your case. Be in a hurry to hear the other side out. Then you begin to connect with people on a human level. We said the goal of the negotiation is not to get the other side to say yes. The goal of the negotiation is to get the other side to go, that's right.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Chris Voss, the former FBI lead international kidnapping negotiator who handled more than 150 international hostage cases and spent 3 years investigating the first bombing of the World Trade Center. You are the co-author of the best-selling book, Never Split the Difference, and the founder and principal of the Black Swan Group, a consulting firm that advises Fortune 500 companies to perform complex negotiations. Chris, welcome to London Real.
Thank you, Brian. I'm happy to be here. I like how your socks almost match my book, too. Was that on purpose?
It's not on purpose, but I'm glad you noticed. You know, I want to know, what's it like to be in London? And, you know, are there any negotiators from British times that you might admire that are from this country? And what's it like being here? Is it a different vibe socially? And would that affect negotiations differently? Because I know you're doing some consulting while you're here.
No, you know, we drive at human nature stuff. So everybody's got the same basic wiring in their, what our neuroscience brothers and psychologists would call the limbic system. And it's an awful, the analogy I like to use all the time is it's like the respiratory system. Everybody's got a respiratory system that operates on the same rules. Everybody's got a limbic system. The emotional system operates on the same rules. The other thing that's kind of interesting about it is, if I asked you if you could control your breath, you'd say, all right, you know, I'll hold my breath. And you can control your emotions for about the same amount of time. You can tell yourself to calm, if you're upset, you can tell yourself, calm down, calm down. And that'll last for as long as you can hold your breath. And then your emotions kick right back in. And hostage negotiator, I just know how to get in there and massage that occasionally.
Okay. So we're all humans, basically. We all behave kind of the same way in the same patterns.
Regardless of the age, gender, or ethnicity.
Okay. And you're teaching businessmen here. But is a businessman any different from a kidnapper or a bank robber or a gang member when it comes to negotiations?
Businessmen get upset more. They're more emotional than the terrorists are.
Why is that?
You know, it's kind of crazy, but it's actually really true. Business people have more stories of getting screamed at and people getting upset because both sides are sort of on raw emotion. You put somebody in the middle of that can dial somebody's emotions up or down right away, you're not going to get upset with me. And so hostage negotiators know how to get in and cause an actual productive dialogue, or at least you're going to think it's a productive dialogue, immediately you're going to feel listened to. People yell because they don't feel like they're being heard. Like, my first job is to make you feel like you're being heard, so you're going to stop yelling.
When people yell and swear, is that because they don't have power? Is that kind of a sign of weakness sometimes? Like when I see parents yelling at their kids, it's almost a sign that they're not in control sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's all fear. It's all fear-based. They're afraid of something, one way or another. You know, a parent yells at their child. It's more they're afraid that their child's going to be on the wrong track, and they got a vision in their head of disaster. If this child keeps this behavior up, you know, you're not going to learn. You're not going to be educated. You're not going to get a college degree. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. The human brain is wired to be overly negative.
Okay.
And so one way or another, that's what causes this. Or if I yell at you, it's not because I feel power, but because I feel urgency. And it's something as silly as if you start yelling at me, the first thing I might say is, it sounds like this is really important. Well, that was the first message you were trying to get across,
right,
that I needed to understand it was important. So you'll immediately calm down.
Okay, gotcha. Nice. All right, and I know we're going to go through some techniques and some things that people can use in their everyday lives, because you said the most dangerous negotiation is the one you don't know you're in.
Right.
And we're in negotiations all the time that we're not aware of, right?
Yeah.
I know I'm definitely in negotiations with a lot of people at times that they're not aware of. And so I want to talk about that. I want to hear about your history with bank robbers and kidnappers. But I wanted to kick off and talk about...
Bank robbers. We got to talk about my in-laws?
Oh yeah, we'll talk about them too, right? And kids as well, right? Probably tougher. I wanted to kick off and talk about Trump with Kim Jong-un in North Korea. I know you wrote an article about that, but I wondered if you could just break down what you see as the negotiation tactics between those two gentlemen, even over the past year. And I know you wrote an article about it, and maybe you can even say what you see as with Trump as a negotiator. Again, we've never really had an American president that was kind of a businessman first, so it's a different angle, different priorities, different unknown unknowns as you talk about. What did you see him doing, successfully or unsuccessfully?
Well, yeah, I was a little surprised initially, at all the name calling early on, and the fact that it ended up in such a good place.
Okay, so he called him Rocket Man, and Kim called him kind of irrational and stuff. That surprised you? That didn't seem like a tactic?
That it ended up in such a great place.
Okay.
But then, now that we're looking at it, I mean, both of these guys are sort of the classic aggressive negotiator.
Okay.
The world kind of splits into three types. One of them is a natural-born aggressive/assertive. That happens to be my default type.
Okay, aggressive assertive is one type.
Right.
And the other two are?
Well, it's fight, flight, make friends. The caveman response to threat was if the caveman saw something and he didn't know what it was, he's either going to fight it, he's going to run from it, he's going to try to make friends with it. Those were the three cavemen that survived.
Okay.
That's how our emotions are wired.
And those are the three kind of types of negotiators
Three
as
types
well?
of negotiators.
Okay.
And
Fight, flight, although...
Some would say fight, flight, mate.
Right.
But we fight, flight, make friends.
Okay.
And Trump's a fight guy. I'm a fight guy. That's my natural born type. The other thing too is the world splits pretty evenly into thirds. No matter whether you're Asian, whether you're African, whether you're a Latino, wherever you're from, the world splits pretty much evenly into thirds. We've seen it enough, we've tested it enough that we're pretty satisfied with that.
Okay. Is it most likely that two people involved in a high-level negotiation won't be the flight type, or it could be the flight type?
If the world breaks evenly into thirds, then only one out of three times is your counterpart going to be the same as you. In government, most are not fighters. Heads of government, most of them are make friends or flight. Analysts, very analytical. They see conflict as something to be avoided.
Even our leaders?
Most government leaders are avoiders.
They got there by compromise. They're thinking about their career, their image, long-term things.
Right.
Okay. So it's already rare that we got a president that's the aggressive one.
That's an aggressive, yeah.
Okay.
We've had a few in the past, but not with the same extent. I mean, Ronald Reagan was a fight guy.
Right. But more
Teddy
passive.
Roosevelt, fight guy. Speak softly, carry a big stick. If you're talking about carrying a big stick, you're a fight guy.
Okay. All right, so watching these two behave, it started off with the name calling, then we had kind of a meeting that was on, then it was off, then it was on. You saw the way they behaved with each other, and then you saw the way they both concluded it afterwards. What are some of the elements you see there in negotiation?
Well, not just the elements in this negotiation, but it's also a preview of the future in a number of different ways. They got into details right away. I mean, I think both sides realized that if I let this get too far out of control, if I let the other side start to backtrack and renege on promises or not follow through, this is going to go bad and I'm going to look stupid.
Right.
And I saw President Trump and his crew, his team of core advisors around him, Mike Pompeo, the other people that I think he's listening to on this. I think Mike Pompeo is one of the main ones. They realized that this could go bad in a hurry, so they're not going to let it get an inch out of line. And that's why he initially said, this could go bad. If they don't follow through, we're not even going to go to Singapore. He's signaling the other side, look, don't backtrack. I'm not even going to show. And he also said, look, I'll know in the first few seconds that I'm there whether or not it's going to do any good.
Okay.
What he's signaling to the other side, like the minute we think this is going sideways, we're not going to let you make us look stupid. We're telling the world that we're ready to back out of this in a heartbeat if you don't follow through, if you mess around with this at all. Which I think in this instance, it's a great focus on implementation, and it'll be the one time that we have the best chance at causing North Korea to stick to their promises.
Okay, so that's a good tactic on Trump's part.
I think it's phenomenal.
Because
I'm
it worked.
blown away.
If there was no meeting, we might have said differently, but an impressive tactic, but probably only one that he could have pulled off as an aggressive guy.
Yeah, and also with this focus. I mean, previously, I don't know what's wrong with American presidents. They don't want to dignify the dictator by showing up and sitting down. They're worried about losing face, or then what they're worried about is a previous history of North Korea making promises and not following through with them.
Yeah, they look stupid, and then the whole meeting goes in Kim Jong-un's favor.
Yeah, it's all nonsense.
Now, Trump has always been kind of this profile of, I'm an erratic guy. He's also got a big track record with his business and with buildings with his name on there. So he brings a lot of baggage to the table, maybe that is good for him. Is that something you think he calculates? Because if you're dealing with someone that's erratic, it can be an upper hand in negotiations, right?
Well, he's erratic, but you might refer to him as erratic, but he's not without patterns. Somebody can be erratic and be eminently predictable.
Okay.
Nobody's surprised by that he tweets. Nobody, he keeps doing the same thing over and over again. People are surprised by it. That's ridiculous. He's true to his form. He's true to his type. He continues to do the same thing, which at this point in time, he's like, this is a pattern that's got me this far. It's silly for me to change at this point in time. People wanted him to be a different guy as president of the United States. He's like, why do I change from my pattern of success up to now? That's just, in his thinking, that's silly.
Yeah, and 2 years later, people are starting to think he's crazy like a fox. I mean, people are starting to admire what he can get done, even though no one agreed with or understood the politically incorrect tactics that he did it. But it's starting to look like there's a method to the madness.
And yeah, exactly. And what he can get done, which the assertive negotiator has, and I did this myself, we don't burn bridges, we bomb them. So,
explain that.
Well, aggressive assertive negotiator will have a tendency to hit a few home runs in a given area, and then no one will talk to them anymore. And then at that point in time, they can't since nobody will talk to you anymore, you can't make deals anymore.
Okay.
Now, what the advantage he's got in a foreign policy realm, and my prediction is, North Korea isn't going to be the only success he's going to have in foreign policy, because he goes to North Korea, he takes this approach, and he starts beating people around. But there's two things that's different than any other American president. First is, he's willing to get in there himself. So the other side wants to talk to the American president, and they're going to cut a deal in North Korea. Now, the Iranians are seeing this, and they're thinking, if North Korea can cut a deal with Trump, I bet we can too. Now, the other added element that people tend to ignore is no American president tries to do anything in foreign policy-wise until the second half of their second term. And every other country in a volatile area on the planet knows this. Right. I was in Ramallah, where the government for the Palestinian organization is, in 2008, right after Obama got elected. And the leadership there said, oh God, we hate this because it's going to be 6 years before anybody tries to do anything in the Middle East, because no American president will touch a foreign policy issue till the second half of their second term. What did President Obama do? Didn't try to do anything foreign diplomatically until the second half of his second term. Right. By then the relationship with Israel had been poisoned to the point where they're like, where can we go? We got to go to Iran. And then an American president looks desperate, and the other side knows that all they got to do is wait till the last minute and the Americans will capitulate because the clock is running out on them. President Trump is not sticking around, and he's not putting himself under any deadlines because he's got plenty of time.
Right.
So these guys know the clock is not working against them, but they're very encouraged because he's got the backbone to go into foreign policy in a big way early in his administration, and no other American president has done that. And I think Iran, even the Palestinians, everybody's going to be encouraged by that.
Interesting. What do you rate him as a negotiator from 1 to 10?
Well, he's a prototype classic assertive.
Right. But is he good?
He's good at that.
Okay.
He's good at the deals that it requires a baseball bat to get the deal done. But eventually people get tired of getting hit with the baseball bat.
Right.
Which, interestingly enough, which publicly he's a baseball bat guy, but privately he sits down and suddenly he's buddies with people.
That's what I hear.
Suddenly he's chums with Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
He's a nice guy. I like him. We had a good time with him. I really
He probably
enjoyed it.
genuinely means that, right?
I think he does.
I think he does too. You said in the book that someone's 6 times more likely to make a deal with someone if they like that person.
Likeable is a huge. You don't have to change your position.
Isn't that
And
crazy?
You get a lot more by being likable.
I mean, that's crazy. I mean, it's a crazy thing to know it's that much, because technically you'd think that him would be thinking about a deal for the country, for the next 100 years, maybe even for economics. But the last thing he'd be thinking is a personal relationship with Trump, because the max that'll be is 6 years. And yet it has such a bearing because we're emotional creatures, right?
Right.
That's why you're still in business, because you're teaching people how to tap into that, right?
Yeah.
We're an analytic society, we know the numbers work, but when it
Right.
comes to negotiations, that goes out the window.
Well, emotions come in the window.
Okay.
And how our brain reacts. And see, the other thing about being likable that's a strategic advantage is you're also up to 31% smarter in a positive frame of mind. So if I'm likable, you're going to be in a better mood. And not only will you think of better ideas in our negotiation, you'll also be more inclined to put them on the table for me because you were smarter and you like me.
So I'll be
we're
smarter
gonna
because I'm
make
in a
a
better
better
mood.
deal. What's that?
I'll be smarter because I'm in a better mood.
Will, if I smile at you,
Okay. So
I hit your mirror neurons. It's an involuntary response. There's a chemical change in your brain, and your brain capacity actually increases.
it just worked when you smiled at me. All right. So you're seeing some things now. The fascinating thing is when they finished, and you talk about this in the book as well, this concept of unknown unknowns. So when people go into a deal together and say it's something that's ultra simple, like I'm going to buy something at a store and the price is this and the product is this, and you think there's nothing else to negotiate about, when in fact there's all of this unknown territory that people can cut deals here and there, and people can walk out extremely satisfied even if they paid double, or extremely unsatisfied even if they sold the product. Kim wants to go back and said, I did this, and Trump wants to go back and I did this. But talk to me about this concept of these unknown unknowns, because they're motivated by different things, right?
Right. Well, and it's really the unknown unknowns are the overlap of the unknowns. Now, what the hell am I talking about when I say that? Yeah. You're hiding cards. Every negotiation, I walk to the table, I get stuff I'm not telling you.
Every negotiation.
Every negotiation.
Even with me and my kid trying to get him to go to bed.
Right.
Right.
Right. There's stuff that you're thinking about that's valuable to you.
Right. And same with him, the kid.
Everybody. Yeah.
Right. So I'm thinking that the last thing I want him to do is bang his head on the ground until it bleeds. So he's got a card on me. And then maybe he's thinking, if Dad could just let me watch the movie and go to bed, then I'd be happy to go to bed. And so we both have these maybe unknown areas, I don't know if I'm explaining that right, where if we knew that, we might be able to have power over one another or come to a better deal.
Well, you're always thinking about what's coming in the future, too.
Okay.
Like, you want your kid to go to bed because you want your kid to study, you want your kid to be healthy, maybe you want your kid to play sports. Maybe you have a vision for where your kid's life is going. Your kid's got another vision, but there's stuff in there there's an overlap of a kid likes sports. Kid wants to be happy. Kid wants things. Maybe the kid wants things in his life that he's already thinking about. As a little kid, he's imagined being an astronaut. Who knows what's in their head? But you want to know what's in their head because everybody's got something where they feel their life is going. What's the future look like? What do I hope for? What do I want to have fun doing?
Okay, so you play about future expectations for both parties.
And then we work our way back.
Okay, not necessarily the present kind of short-term wins. You're talking about kind of the future.
Yeah, why do you want your kid to get a good night's sleep?
Yeah. guess it is.
Because how it affects the rest of how it affects this week, how it affects their schoolwork, how it affects their life, how it affects how they interact with the other kids, how they socialize. I mean, you're always thinking about where's this going, what's going to happen, how is my future being built, whether it's you or your kid.
Okay. So knowing that, when I go into a negotiation with anybody, how can I maximize that knowledge, whether it's about me or the other person involved? This
Well,
unknown.
I'm gonna try to tease out what's in your head about your future.
Okay.
You know, and then I need to know what you see in your head and where you see things are going.
Okay.
And I can't change that until I know what it is. And we've always got an overly negative view because that's the way we're wired. We can't help ourselves. And Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Peace Prize in behavioral economics for pointing this out to the world, that we're overly negative. And how does that manifest itself? Loss things twice as much as gain. If I take $5 from you, it's going to hurt twice as much as if I give you $5.
Right. Okay.
And in business, 70% of buy decisions are made to avoid loss. But most businesses, I'm pitching your gain. Here's how this is going to benefit you. Here's how you're going to be better off. And your first thought is going to be like, here's what I stand to lose. Mm. And so I go in through that side door, and it's a much faster route because you'll do the deal with me as soon as I get rid of the obstacles. Okay. What are you afraid of? What are you worried about losing? We're talking to an energy company in Texas just a couple weeks ago. They're talking about, and as crazy as it is, they're still discovering new oil fields in Texas. One of the last big oil fields they discovered there was in 2008. I would have thought they stopped discovering oil in Texas 50 years ago. But 2008, one of the biggest oil fields they ever found in Texas. What does that mean? That means they're still buying land from Texas landowners. And this Texas landowner is not selling this oil company the rights to his land. And they're following this guy around. They're waiting for him in the gym. I mean, they're trying to show him that they can be trusted. What does that mean? They're trying to overcome mistrust. But they're pitching him with how much money he's going to make every step of the way, which is what every other oil company pitches a guy. And they were just hung around long enough that finally he got the message that they weren't a fly-by-night operation and that he could trust them, and they cut the deal. But now that they know taking my approach, instead of taking 6 months to get past his mistrust, we can get him past that mistrust in a week.
How?
By saying right off the bat, you know what? We probably seem like everybody else that's pitching you these get-rich schemes. And from your position, we got to be hard to trust because we look like everybody else. Because that's exactly what he's saying in his head.
Right.
And the minute you articulate what's in the other guy's head, then all of a sudden they go like, something about you I like. I don't know what it is. And that's how we get in the side door.
Right. I think you say if you try to call out a negative that's not there, you won't plant it, which is I think you're saying there. But if you try to deny a negative that's not there, then you plant that thing.
The 2 millimeter shift. And it's crazy because everybody's used to denying negatives. Because that oil guy, if we hadn't taught him, he might have said, you know what, I don't want us to look like everybody else. I don't want you to think that we're like every other salesperson.
Right.
And that's when the guy goes, you're denying it. You must be like them.
Right.
Otherwise you wouldn't deny it. The gut reaction is you deny what you're afraid of. But when you say, you know, we probably look like everybody else, then now suddenly I look accountable to you. I look honest. I look fearless to you.
What's the next statement after you say that? We probably look like this big oil company that wants to come in and muscle you over and squeeze you out of a good deal. What's the next line after that?
Well, then it's a little bit of a dance at that point.
Right.
And my next line is this. I got to shut up. I got to read you. I got to let you react. You're going to tell me one or two things. Either I'm on the right track and you need to hear more of me diffusing the negative, or you're going to relax a little bit and you're going to like, I don't know. And then you're probably going to say, look, here's what's important to me. Everybody else wants a 99-year lease. You know, I got kids I got to worry about, all right? You know, I've just opened a trust that I'm moving my assets into. You're going to tell me what you need to make the deal.
Okay.
And at that point in time, Now the next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna watch me to see if I actually listen to you.
Right.
There's an article that I saw a few years ago. The guy in charge of marketing for Facebook said he hated dealing with people from Hollywood because they all sit down, they say, what's keeping you up at night? And then don't listen to the answer.
Right.
So
they teed it up perfectly. The guy's about to share the unknown, and they're busy not even listening.
they don't even listen to
They're
the
thinking
answer.
about their next move, maybe.
Yeah, or they're gonna pitch what they came to pitch no matter what he says.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Talk to me about silence and the use of silence. You just used it there on me.
Right.
But sometimes it's not the right thing to do because people, they react differently to silence, right?
Well, yeah, we got to watch how we react to silence. Like some relationship-oriented people, they signal anger by giving somebody the silent treatment. So they will misinterpret silence, and they will say silence. The other side's mad. They're upset. I got to talk. When in fact the other side might be trying to think. So silence is a dynamic. In order for it to be effective, hence the term effective pause, you got to read the other side in the moment. And so I'll shut up, and you're gonna give me massive amounts of information as to how you're reacting. I'm either gonna see a contemplative look on your face, I'm gonna see a go on look on your face, or there's some people that are really good at holding their face but can't hold their hands. And we see the highly analytical people will keep a complete stone face, and their hands or their feet will start to move.
Okay. What's the biggest tell for men?
Well, tell is context.
Okay.
And that's why I need to talk to you long enough to know the context. And what am I talking about there? What I'm really looking for is the way a polygraph works is it's not trying to pick up your tells, it's trying to establish your baseline. What do you look like when you're telling the truth? You're going to lie 15 ways. You're going to tell the truth one way. So my small talk is really designed to get your baseline on what you look like when you're telling the truth. What did you have for breakfast today? What was your commute like in today? How many kids have you got? The stuff that the polygrapher asks you a bunch of baseline questions. And then anytime you deviate from that, if I say, look, what's really important to you? And you're like,
Does that mean breaking eye contact?
breaking eye contact, looking in a different direction, chances are you've probably got at least 4 different ways that you signal discomfort. Lying is just a means of discomfort. Now, if I get a tell out of you, the other thing I got to do is not go, aha! But what I really got to do
That'll
is I'll
ruin the
say,
negotiation or let me know you know. It just makes everybody uncomfortable.
it makes everybody uncomfortable.
Okay.
But I'll say, seems like something's bothering you. And then you'll tell me.
But it's probably going to be hands related, moving feet or legs, looking away. I mean, there will be some basics. Right.
Right. And we were with a construction company yesterday, and one of their highly analytical guys, his signal is just that his eyebrows come up. Now, when his eyebrows came up, one of the other people in the training misinterpreted that he was insulted because we were talking about his particular type and their reaction. And his eyebrows came up, and the other type said, what about that bothered you? Because he thought he was insulted. And he just kind of went, I don't know. And then I came back and I said, seems like you're uncomfortable. And he said, really, I was just really thinking about this. As somebody told me before, this was one of my big issues. Now, there was 2 completely different responses there. And I knew somebody asked him a question, he gave a very guarded answer. Now, we need to gather information. I didn't ask him a question. I said, it seems like that made you think about something. It seems like that bothered you. And then, boom, floodgates of truth-telling are opened up by my observation. Because a question put him on guard, where my observation of his reaction sort of bypassed the prefrontal cortex, went in the side door again, and suddenly it's like, well, what he wasn't insulted by was he found it intriguing because he'd gotten some coaching feedback that was one of his issues and he was trying to fix it. And it had been called out in the conversation, and instead of being offended by it, he was actually reacting very positively. So you also have to be concerned about what your interpretation of their tells are. They might be lying. They might be reacting really positively. You got to pull out of them what's going on behind their head without automatically assuming that it meant he was uncomfortable and that was a negative thing. He actually really appreciated the observation.
Okay.
So you got to stay with people in a way that you don't go ah,
Right.
because then it drives them back.
Are all negotiations really therapy?
Yeah, if you're a great negotiator, because the other side is going to want to talk to you even more. They're going to want to be honest with you. They're going to want to tell you what their unknowns are. They're going to want to tell you, if you're going to want to tell me what you're hiding, it's kind of got to be a therapeutic experience.
Right.
And you're not going to.
And just to be clear, I mean, it's in everyone's interest to kind of open up and show each other the cards? Or it's not like I'm going to get you and then I'm going to win, but it really, I mean, is it really in both parties' interest if they can discover each of their unknowns?
Yeah, because it depends upon whether or not you take yourself hostage. But first of all, the best deal possible, we both got to show our cards, because we never know how those cards overlap. And we'll never get to the best deal we could possibly make unless we open up. Now, maybe we'll make some acceptable deals. Maybe we'll make survivable deals. But without opening up, we cannot maximize the opportunity. And then that requires trust.
Let's talk about trust and like some of the probably the big moment of your career where you put it on the line and everyone was watching, and that was the first bank robbery. So tell me about that situation. Tell me about bank robberies in general. Actually, you know, in the book you kind of talk about the history of negotiations, but I think it's more negotiations in a real-time audio medium, right? When we're talking about what happened in the 70s, and I think that's really interesting because, you know, negotiations have been going on since the time of Genghis Khan, I'm guessing. They would send someone in. I even think in the Iliad, like they're sending people into the gates and they negotiate, but this whole concept of a real-time, on-the-phone negotiation is new, and that's kind of what you specialized in originally. So, I don't know, if you could tell me a little bit about that, and then the situation you were in and what you learned on that bank robbery day, because that's pretty unique.
Yeah, well, bank robbery in Brooklyn, you know, 6,000 years ago, back in early 1900s.
What is it, 80s? 70s?
No, this
80s.
the bank robbery was in, when was the bank robbery? It was in 93. I think it was in 93. That was a crazy year. There was crazy stuff that happened that year. It was nuts.
In 93, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy. Was that World Trade Center bombing too? Okay, yeah, they were the first one in the parking structure.
Right.
So there's banks in Brooklyn. I didn't know that, first of all.
Okay. There's trees in Brooklyn, there's banks in Brooklyn.
Right, right. So first of all, real quick on like hostage negotiation and those kinds of things, that's a fairly new phenomenon, right?
Relatively speaking, yeah. Hostage negotiation per se was invented in about 1972. As a result, what triggered it across the law enforcement world were the Munich Olympics.
Okay.
With the Palestinians and the Israeli athletes.
Right, so 72 in Munich. As I remember, there's a great movie called One Day in September.
One Day in September.
Yeah, and so as I remember, the Germans were they didn't want to project a lot of force at that event, and they didn't want to look like a police state for the hangover from World War II.
Right.
So they probably were a little bit lax, and then it was the Israeli wrestling team or something that got...
Israeli athletes, a number of them were wrestlers.
Right, okay, and taken hostage.
Weightlifters.
And then on top of all that, the Olympics was going on. There's news crews everywhere, real-time video feeds.
It's insane.
It's insane. And so that's like one of the first times where there's this real-time multimedia kind of negotiation process.
Right. And that's a phenomenal, if you're into terrorism, and great insight into the Palestinians also, because they interview the surviving Black September terrorist. And he talked about, you know, growing up in a refugee camp and feeling like a wretched refugee, which meant it was an identity issue, which is what it is for everybody in every negotiation. How does this affect who I am as a human being? And that's how these guys get into this, because he says, I grew up feeling like I was a wretched refugee, and becoming a terrorist gave me an identity. Wow. And then you begin to understand how these guys get into that. But then they get into the hostage taking, and there hadn't been any negotiations at the time, and the Germans are trying not to use force. And it was just one train wreck after another, and resulting in just a horrific incident that the German authorities almost pulled it off. With a little bit of command and control, they would have pulled off the rescue at the airport. But their command and control fell apart, and their discipline of their assaulters. They had some police officers that were waiting on one of the jets that the Palestinians were supposed to board to leave Munich. And at the last minute, the assault team on the jet took a vote to abandon their posts. I mean, it's insane. They might have pulled it off if those guys hadn't abandoned their posts.
Knowing what you know now about both sides, how would you have negotiated that? I mean, again, if you already know that information about these Palestinian guys, I mean, that can be a very powerful unknown.
Absolutely.
And they're also, I think people forget, and maybe you can talk about this too, is that they're in a situation they didn't necessarily design. They sure as hell didn't emotionally prepare for what's happening, and let alone in the first minute, let alone 30 minutes or days into it. I mean, this is all adrenaline, madness. They're probably scared.
Yep. They're reverting to being humans in the midst of this. It's the interesting thing in the study of terrorism over the years. Terrorist leaders, big problem is the cannon fodder they send into these are still human beings, and they're still wired the same way everybody is, and they still have the emotional system that everybody has, and they know that as a human being, you're going to get scared. You can't override that system. It's going to continue to function, and that's exactly what happened to those guys. They thought they were going to get out of there, and in fact, some of them did. You know, one of them, hats off to the people that did that documentary, because they tracked down a remaining member of Black September and put him on camera and interviewed him.
Oh, wow.
How do you pull that off? Because he's still a human being.
Right, and he still wants to talk about it.
Everybody wants to talk. If you're alive, you want to talk. If you're in a business deal, you want to talk. You just got to understand how to unlock somebody from talking.
Okay. And so knowing what you know now, how would you have approached that negotiation?
If they would have just had a little bit of command and control, and there are some situations where you got to call in a SWAT team.
Right.
And at that point in time, if somebody wants to leave, and the Palestinians wanted to leave, they wanted to escape, they're telling you loud and clear they want to live. And that gives you the edge. And at that point in time, you start talking to them about how their actions are going to help them live. Or if they want to live, the other thing they want to do is they want to be heroes. Everybody wants to be a hero. Everybody wants to be immortal. An athlete wants to be in a Hall of Fame. What athletes want more than winning championships is to be in a Hall of Fame. And you begin to understand what people want that makes them immortal, then you can talk about whatever it is that makes them immortal.
Okay. And also, from a law enforcement perspective, you can open up holes in their game, open up gaps in the plan where they might agree to something they wouldn't normally agree to that will give you a tactical advantage.
Right.
Okay. Interesting. And so people should definitely watch that movie. They basically indicated they wanted to live, wanted to get to the airport, and then it kind of all went wrong there. So it's a great film to watch. Tell me about the bank robbery. And by the way, you're a former SWAT guy, so you kind of know that side of it, which is probably makes you a different kind of negotiator than other people, knowing what it's like on the ground. But what happened that day? What did you learn? Were you nervous? And how did you get in that situation?
Well, I wasn't nervous. I mean, by that point in time, I'd been doing the process enough that I was comfortable with the process.
But you'd only been practicing.
Well, practicing, but my real life practicing had been, I'd spent a lot of time on a suicide hotline, which is real life emotions.
Okay.
And so I knew how powerful this stuff was walking in. A suicide hotline, you got to talk somebody down off a ledge, figuratively, literally, in 20 minutes or less.
Wow.
And I remember when I first got there, I'm like, 20 minutes? How's that going to work? You know, on TV, they're on the phone for hours. I said, no, if you do this right, you'll be done in 20 minutes or less. And it was true. And that's why, you know, our analogy in business, the application of this stuff saves time. I mean, I had one of my students say this, you know, tactical empathy saves time. So we get to the bank. By the time they hand me the phone, I'm like, I'm just going to put my process on these guys. I'm using late night FM DJ voice. And the guy's going to calm down, and he did.
You got a phone line to him. Is that what happened?
On the phone, yeah.
Okay,
and
so
then
the day of, they went to rob it. They didn't plan on the situation?
3 guys, we didn't know at the time there were 3. 2 went inside, the getaway driver stayed on the outside. The ringleader planned on robbing the bank. He told the other guys they were going to rob the cash machine. So they thought they were only going to get as far as inside to rob the cash machine. The insane idea was this guy actually ran a cash courier route. So he knew where the cash machine was. He knew how to get into it. He convinced these guys that since he had all this information, they could avoid the camera that took pictures. He could disable everything. They could get in and out clean. They could take all this money. Nobody'd ever find him. What he really wanted was the money in the vault. And he didn't tell anybody that till they got inside the bank, and then he pulled out a .357, started waving around, took hostages. Everybody was surprised, even the guy that followed him inside. And then so they trip the bank alarm. A passerby sees what's going on inside. The getaway driver on the outside was kind of like, feet don't fail me now. He got out of there immediately. We show up at the bank. We get the bank surrounded. The guy on the inside is actually the classic CEO negotiator. Classic CEO negotiator pretends like he's powerless. Use nothing but plural pronouns.
Example of that would be?
He said, there are all these other guys in here. I got all these other decision makers. I don't have any power. This bank robber said, I'm scared of the other guys. I'm going to have to get off the phone because they're going to catch me on the phone with you. And then he'd get off the phone. He was completely in charge. A business, the most influential negotiator in the negotiation team on the other side, if he comes to the table, he's going to say, we got all these people in my company that I'm accountable to. Okay. I'm only the spokesperson. But I've got a board I got to talk to. I've got all these people who just completely constrain me.
Okay, that's not Trump style. But
that is not Trump style.
Right,
but that's the guy who's hiding his power.
Okay, because he is powerful.
Because he's the last word. If a decision maker comes to the table, they're very cautious about how they come to the table. The analogy with Trump was, although he looks like the decision maker, look how cautiously he approached Singapore once the deal was set. He cautiously said, I'm going to know inside the first minute whether or not this is a legitimate negotiation. I'm going to know if this is going sideways. Then he had people signaling this for him. He had all these people in what we call hardwire control. He knew the conversations that were going on in advance. He had all those people in advance saying, if this goes sideways, we are out of here the minute we smell it. And that's how he maintained control to keep himself from getting backed into a corner. And of course, what's he end up doing? He goes and he makes all these pitches. He shows them a video,
Movie.
Which evidently appealed to the counterpart.
Interesting, huh?
And then also he made it a point
probably
to get out of there as quickly as he could.
Okay.
To leave the details to his guys. How long did he stay? I mean,
like
headlines, Trump's out early.
Yeah.
He's letting people know that he's extremely worried about implementation, and he got away from the table as quickly as he could so that he couldn't get backed into a corner at the table.
So having tactical control of your team is just as important as you being on message as well.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very good. And as much as tactical control is, you don't want your people saying stupid things.
Right. Loose lips sink ships.
Or you don't want somebody on your side going like, you know what? He's really worried about this. So if you come in on this angle, we can make this deal. And that actually happens in business all the time. Leaders are like, why did you tell them that? You revealed stuff that I wasn't ready, not that I would never reveal it, but I wasn't ready for you to reveal it now. And that's actually defections on your side when your people become impatient are one of the biggest problems.
Okay, cool. Back to this bank, you're talking to this guy, he's implying that there's other people involved, he's not in power, not in control. Do you buy it right away or no?
No, well, I didn't know that was the read at the time. I now know that that's a common tactic of a smart leader, to act powerless at the table. But I didn't know it at the time. Initially get him into a conversation, and he said something that surprised me so much. By accident, I reverted to a negotiation skill we refer to as a mirror, which he said, I asked him about a van. We figured we had the getaway van. He said, we got a van out here. And he said, you chased my driver away. And I was so startled by that, I went back to my training and I just said, we chased your driver away. And he said, yeah, well, when he saw the police, he cut and run. I said, he cut and run? He said, yeah, the guy's, he left. I said, well, what about the van? He said, we only have one van. I said, you only have one van? He said, we have more than one van. And he just started inadvertently, a highly controlled guy, the mirror triggered some inadvertent responses.
So you're basically, if people don't figure out what's going on there, Chris is repeating back to him the last 4 or 5 words he said.
Right.
But you're doing it in a way where it actually sounds like a genuine question, but it's making him open up more.
For whatever reason, it hits the brain where people go on.
Okay.
And it's actually it works better than saying, what did you mean by that? Like at this point in time, I never ask anybody, what did you mean by that? I'll just repeat the words I'm not clear on, and they'll go, yeah, well, this is...
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.